Good evening, everybody. This is Augustus Corbett. I'm an attorney here in the city of Dallas, Texas, and I wanted to come today and give you some of the thoughts that I have with respect to the Amber Guyger trial, the Amber Guyger trial that concluded here in Dallas in the past couple of days. And it has been going all over the nation. And there are a lot of people who have a lot of questions, a lot of issues with some things that happened with this trial. And I want to give you some of my thoughts with respect to some of those issues. So we're going to jump off here and talk about this trial here. So first of all, let's talk about Botham Jean. Botham Jean. Botham Jean was a young man from St. Lucia, the island of St. Lucia, who came to Dallas to work in an accounting firm. Okay, he was a fine young man. From everything that I've heard about him, he was a worship leader. He was a committed Christian, a committed church member of the Church of Christ, and just an overall great guy, someone that everybody loved. Everybody who knew him loved him. He lived in some apartments right across, almost across the street from the police headquarters here in the city of Dallas. And so, you know, he was a great guy. He was a good guy, just a really good guy from a good family, from a strong family, and college graduate, you know, just really had things on the ball. Okay. Now, who is Amber Guyger? Amber Guyger is a former Dallas police officer. And she, by all accounts, was someone who had some issues. She had some issues in her life. She had some issues that we're going to talk about. And, you know, don't want to spend too much time talking about Miss Guyger as much, because Mr. Jean is the victim in this case. OK, so I wanted to really highlight where he came from, what kind of stock he came from, what type of family he came from. Miss Guyger, on the other hand, I don't mean to disparage her character, but there were some things that came out at trial that are very, very, very troubling and probably played into what ended up happening in this case. So now, how did their paths cross? How did Mr. Jean and Miss Guyger's path cross? Well, here's how they crossed. Miss Guyger lived in the same apartment building that Botham Jean lived in. Okay. And from what came out at trial, she was at work as a police officer on a particular day, on the day that she shot Mr. Jean. And after she got home, she mistakenly parked on the wrong parking deck. And she went to what she thought was her apartment. Okay. She thought it was her apartment. When she got to her apartment, when she got to what she thought was her apartment, it ended up being Mr. Jean's apartment. She saw that the door was open. She pulled out her revolver and she ended up shooting him center of mass, I think, and it killed him. Now, Mr. Jean was home doing nothing, minding his own business, eating ice cream. Okay. And she went to his apartment, the wrong apartment, overlooking all sorts of signs that it wasn't her apartment, and went to his apartment and shot and killed him. And I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but the way it came out at trial, when she shot and killed him, she didn't really try to do very much to save his life. Instead, she was texting her partner / boyfriend, who happened to also be a married man with children. And so she's doing that rather than, according to the trial, rather than doing everything she could to try and save Mr. Jean's life. Okay. Now, when she shot him, she did say that she tried to massage his chest a little bit, but she didn't do any CPR. Okay. Once again, she was texting her partner / lover. Now, it came out at trial that she and her lover deleted those text messages, but the prosecutor's office was able to retrieved those messages nonetheless, those text messages, one to the other. And they also brought out at trial that she was actually texting her lover / partner 2 or 3 minutes before she actually shot Mr. John. So it appears that had she been focused on where she was parking and getting to the right apartment rather than texting her partner and lover, she might have would have seen that she went to the wrong floor and consequently to the wrong apartment and would not have shot that young man to death. Okay. It also came out that she was a racist or is a racist. The prosecutors were able to retrieve some other text messages. I looked at the trial, so I saw this for myself. She was texting back and forth to some police officers, fellow police officers. One of the text messages, one of the other officers texted her and said, "I have a dog, but I think he's racist." And Amber Guyger said, "That's no problem. I am too, basically. I am the same. In other words, I am a racist too." So she admitted in her text messages that she was indeed a racist. Someone also, she was covering, patrolling the MLK. We have an MLK parade here every year right around the time of Martin Luther King's birthday. So she was one of the officers who was patrolling the MLK parade. And she and some of the other officers were texting one another, frustrated that they were at the parade. And one of the officers texted her and asked, "How long would this go on?" And Amber Guyger texted back and said, "When MLK is dead." And then she said, "Oh, wait, ... I mean, just disparaging the death of a really, really great man, a really, really great American. So that's why I said earlier, she had some serious problems. Now, whether her racist, violent problems had anything to do with shooting Mr. John, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that the prosecutors were necessarily trying to show that this was a racially motivated shooting at all, but they did charge her with murder. And as you know, she was convicted of murder. Okay, she was convicted of murder. Now, I got to be honest with you. I was just a little bit surprised that she was convicted of murder. And here's why. The reason why is because most police officers, white police officers who shoot and kill innocent, unarmed black men are not only are they not convicted of murder, many of them are not even indicted. Okay, that's the stat. Most are not indicted at all. Grand juries have a pattern of not indicting white police officers who kill black men, and we have many examples. I could go down the list of all the examples. I'll spare you of that, but we all know about them. And in most of those cases, they're not indicted. And if they are indicted, most of the time they are not convicted. But it just so happened that Amber Guyger was convicted of murder, okay? Not of manslaughter, but of murder here in the city of Dallas. Now, Dallas is somewhat setting a precedent because this is the second white police officer who has been convicted of murder for killing an innocent, unarmed black person, black man specifically, an innocent, unarmed black man. We had, I think it was just in 2018, Officer Roy Oliver was convicted of murdering a fine young man. I think his name was Jordan Edwards. Okay, he was convicted. The former Officer Oliver was convicted of shooting and killing this fine young football player. Okay, and now a year later, year and a half, 2 years later, whatever it is, Amber Guyger was also convicted of murder for killing Botham Jean. Now that's setting somewhat of a precedent. It's history making because we're getting it done here. But why? Why? Well, I tell you why. Dallas is unusual in another way. Dallas has a black police chief, a black sheriff, a black district attorney, a black mayor, a black city manager, many black judges, many black prosecutors, many black defense lawyers. It's unusual. It's different, probably different than any other city in America with all these blacks in key places. And there's a lot of diversity here in Dallas as well. So in a Dallas jury, I think in this particular case, five of the jury members were African American. Another four or five were Asian, Hispanics, and a couple of whites. Okay. So you typically don't find that with juries, but you don't find that makeup. But here in Dallas, you can get a jury with that makeup. And that was one of the reasons why the defense team wanted to change a venue. They wanted to get the trial out of Dallas County because they knew that there was a lot of diversity here. And they also knew that a lot of people had heard about this case. But the judge denied their motion to have a change of venue. And I'm sure that'll probably, if they appeal, I read today that they are likely to appeal. I don't know if they will, but if they do appeal, that is likely to be one of the appellate issues of the judge denying their motion to change venue. All right, now, after Ms. Guyger was convicted of murder of Botham Jean, the jury then turned around and gave her only 10 years. Only 10 years. Now, 10 years for murder is not a lot of time. And under Texas law, for a murder conviction, whatever time someone gets, they are parole eligible after serving half of that time. If it's life that they get, then they're eligible for parole after 30 years. Okay, so she was sentenced to 10 years, but she'll be eligible for parole after serving 5 years of that 10. And a lot of people are offended by that. A lot of people, including myself, know of people who've done far less and have gotten much, much more time. Okay, so that sent shockwaves in the African American community. It made us ask the question, what is an African American man's life worth? Okay, and so yeah, we were happy to get the murder conviction, but the 10-year sentence was not good. I heard several of the jury members explain why they just felt like that she, just shouldn't. The prosecutor asked for, and by the way, I knew all the prosecutors, practice law with them every day. Fine prosecutors, they did a very good job. I congratulate them, Jason Hermes, Laquita, and there was another one. Her name slips me right at the moment, but they did. And there was another Jason Fine, who also I saw him do the closing argument. I know all of these prosecutors, and they did a good job. They brought the bacon. They got conviction. And it's the reason it's important to me. Now, I'm a criminal defense attorney, and I'm typically on the other side. I fight against the prosecutors. And so I fight to get people, the lowest amount of time that I can get them, and to try my best to see that the state proves its burden before they are convicted. Okay. But in this case, on a personal level, I felt that it was important for the jury to convict Ms. Guyger so that a message would be sent to other police officers, at least in the city of Dallas, that telling them that they must value black male life. Black male life matters. So police officers, I'm sure now, at least here in Dallas, before they pull the trigger, they're going to think and make sure that the law is on their side. Okay? They're not just going to pull up and just pull the trigger, like we seen, for example, in Tamir Rice's case. All right? Within seconds, they pull up on that young man who had a toy gun in his hand, and they start shooting. And Miss Guyger, she started shooting. the prosecutors brought out that what she should have done was backed up. If there was no imminent threat to her life, back up and get some backup coming, get some cover from some fellow officers, call the SWAT. They would have been there. Like I said, headquarters was across the street. They would have been there in a matter of minutes. But instead, she went to blazing. And one of the reasons why she was convicted of murder, maybe the main reason, is because one of the prosecutors asked a very clever question. He asked her, he said, I remember the question almost verbatim. He said, Miss Guyger, when you walked up to that apartment door and it was open and you saw Mr. John in there, she described it as a silhouette. And he said, when you saw Mr. John in there, you aim your gun center mass like you've been trained. So you were intending to kill him, right? And she said yes, affirming that she intended to kill him. Well, the way Texas defines murder, it is the intentional and knowingly killing of another person. And if you do that and there's no justification, that's murder. Now, they tried to argue that it was self-defense. They even tried to argue the castle doctrine, meaning, I don't know how they got that out of that, but they argue that the castle doctrine says someone doesn't have to retreat at their own house and can defend their own home. She wasn't at her home. She was at his home. And so how the castle doctrine got in, I'm not sure about that, but they were able to get it in. The judge allowed it in. They also argued mistake of fact. In other words, it was a simple mistake. She was mistakenly thinking she was at her apartment. So the prosecutors, the criminal defense lawyers, argued to the jury that they should not find her guilty of murder because it was a simple, horrible mistake. The jury rejected all of that and returned that guilty verdict. Okay? Now, after all of that happened, there has been a lot of talk about several things that happened to Miss Guyger after she was convicted and after she was sentenced. Well, one thing happened even before she was convicted that went all over social media. And that was this black bailiff who was rubbing Miss Guyger's hair, okay? Rubbing her hair. Now, I don't know what that was all about, but I know how it looked. It looked bad on so many different levels, okay? And you know what? In fact, I think she had already been convicted. And then that's when the bailiff started rubbing her hair, which really makes it even worse, right? Because the bailiff is there rubbing a convicted murderer's hair, a murderer who had murdered a young, innocent, unarmed black man, okay? And yet the bailiff is standing there rubbing her hair. I don't know why she was doing it. Someone said she was looking for contraband. I have no idea, but the optics of that were horrible. I mean, just bad, all right? But not only that, Botham Jean's young brother, when he did his victim impact statement, a victim impact statement is where the family members, after a trial like this, after a murder trial, after the person has been convicted and sentenced, they can come and tell the defendant how their actions impacted them, how it impacted their family. And when Botham Jean's younger brother gave his victim impact statement, he was very, very forgiving. He was very loving. In fact, I didn't hear all that he said. I've only seen clips of it, but he asked the judge if he could go give her a hug. It's reported that he told her that he didn't even want to see her go to jail. It's reported that, that he expressed just a lot of love toward her, and he walked over, and you've seen it by now, and he gave her, and she ran to him, and they gave each other this great, big, hearty embrace. I mean, a big, big, long embrace. Now, folks have asked me my opinion on that. And, well, let me share my opinion. First of all, I am a committed Christian. I love the Lord. I'm a committed Christ follower. And we as Christians, we are commanded to forgive everyone of everything. Christ did it as he was breathing his last breath. Before he took his last breath on the cross, he prayed to the Father and said, Lord, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. And then he commanded us in several places on several occasions to forgive others. So the young man expressing that forgiveness to Amber Guyger was the Christian thing to do. Now, that said, my question is whether or not it was the smart thing to do publicly. Was that public display of forgiveness, was it the smart thing to do in light of all the suffering that African Americans have experienced at the hands of white police officers specifically, of white racism and white supremacy generally? And here we go, before our loved one is in the ground good, we're expressing all sorts of forgiveness publicly. I remember when Dylan Roof shot up the church, Mother Emanuel Church in Charleston, South Carolina. Well, immediately family members began expressing forgiveness for Dylan Roof. Now, excuse me, once again, forgiveness is the Christian thing to do. I don't question that. No one should question that who understands what it means to be a Christian. We forgive. And we forgive for our own, solace and peace. Because by holding on to hurt and unforgiveness, it causes you to become bitter, and you can't move on from that situation. I've had this to happen in my family where someone was tragically taken away from me, and I had to forgive the people. So forgiving is of God. I would never, ever as a Christian condemn anybody for forgiving anyone. Okay? But again, the question is it wise? Is it smart to do publicly? Because again, folks who have done us wrong for centuries tend to manipulate our public display of forgiveness. They tend to use it and focus on it. For example, as soon as the young man hugged Miss Guyger and embraced her, the media began to focus immediately on the embrace and the forgiveness. And they forgot all that Botham Jean's mother has been saying about the need for reform, the need for change, the need for justice. They don't even hardly show all the powerful things that she said about the city of Dallas Police Department, about racism generally. All they focus on is that hug by that young man. Okay? So that hug and that public display of forgiveness, again, the media, the racists, they all just, they misinterpret it, they manipulate it, they take advantage of it. And some of them even consider it as weakness. Okay? So I just question whether it was a good thing to do publicly. You can privately, in light and context of all the stuff that we've dealt with as a people, I think it would be better to privately express that so that the media doesn't capture it and get away from the real issues and just focus on, well, look how forgiving they are. Black people are always forgiving people who murder us. Yeah, we forgive, and we do it because we're Christians, those of us who are. But I do question whether or not it's a good thing to do publicly. Okay? That's private. I think it's a better thing to do private. That's my opinion. Okay? I don't, but I don't condemn this young man at all. He gets a pass from me. He did what he felt was necessary for him to move on, what he thought his bigger brother would want him to do. Okay? We can't question that. All right? But for me, is something that I would have done in private so that the media and the racists and the white supremacists will not take that as weakness and manipulate it and focus on that and get away from all the reforms that need to be done in the criminal justice system in America. Okay, that's my opinion on that. Now, some others were also outraged because of some of the actions of the judge who presided over this trial. Now, I know this judge. I don't know her well. She was elected not many years ago. She was a prosecutor for many years here in Dallas. But from all accounts, she's a fine judge. Okay. And so there were three things that she did that folks really questioned. And that is, she hugged Miss Guyger. Now, I want to point out, she showed a lot of compassion and love for the family members first. Okay. There was some who thought that she was hugging Miss Guyger before she had showed any expressions of love to the family members. That's not true from what I understand. I wasn't in court, but from what I understand, she first expressed love and compassion for both of John's family, the mom, the dad, the brother, the sister, etc. Eventually, though, she ended up hugging Miss Guyger. Well, someone says she shouldn't have been hugging Miss Guyger. Then she also quoted Miss Guyger a scripture, reportedly. From what I read, she quoted Miss Guyger John 3:16. And she then went further and gave Miss Guyger a Bible, gave her her personal Bible, went into her chambers and came back and gave Miss Guyger her Bible. So she hugged Miss Guyger, she quoted John 3:16 to Miss Guyger, and then she gave Miss Guyger her Bible. Listen, how can anyone be angry at that? Those are very Christ-like things to do. Hugging someone. Why do I say that? Well, Miss Guyger had just been convicted of murdering this unarmed young black man. No question about that. She was found guilty. She was sentenced to 10 years. Many of us think it should have been higher, but the jury spoke. They gave her 10 years. What is wrong then with showing Miss Guyger some sympathy, some love? Again, that's the Christian thing to do. I know we get called weak because we show love to people that we shouldn't show love to. I get that. But love, showing people love in their lowest moment. Look, I do that as a criminal defense lawyer all the time. The people that I represent, when they are charged with these offenses, they are oftentimes, they're condemned by the world. They're condemned by society. They're condemned by the legal system. Sometimes they're condemned by their own families. And oftentimes, me as their lawyer, I'm the only one standing with them. Okay? So what the judge did was I heard somebody say it was a very human moment. And I agree with that. Okay? I completely agree with that. And quoting John 3:16, I'm never going to condemn anybody or criticize anybody for quoting John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That's one of the most quoted and famous verses of scripture in the world. And it's a powerful verse of scripture. And God bless Judge Kemp for quoting that verse of scripture to this young woman. I already told you earlier that Miss Guyger had all kind of issues, racial issues, violence issues in her heart. The judge felt the need to share the gospel with her so that she could get her heart right while she was in jail, while she's in prison. Okay? I think that's a beautiful thing. There's nothing absolutely wrong with that. And then giving her a Bible. Hello, everybody. I hope you enjoyed my commentary on the Amber Guyger trial. This was a very controversial trial. Some people are dissatisfied with the sentencing. Other folks are real happy that she was convicted of murder. Some people were upset that she was shown forgiveness and grace by members of both John's family as well as the judge. Some folks thought it was appropriate. I expressed how I felt about it. I want to say several things that I hope we all can agree on. And that is, number one, that we express our sincere condolences to Botham Jean's family, okay, to his mom, to his father, to his younger brother, and to sisters and, extended family. And secondly, I hope we can all agree that a strong message was sent to police officers, at least here in the city of Dallas, the county of Dallas, that before you pull the trigger and take the life of an innocent, unarmed, young African-American male, you better think twice, because you could end up in prison. That's a strong message, and I thank God for it. It makes my life, it makes my son's life, nephews, friends, church members' life safer when they know they must value our life, when they know that our lives matter. God bless you. Again, I'm Attorney Augustus Corbett here in the city of Dallas. Have a good evening.